The Minnesota Vikings may have just made the most important move of their entire offseason, and it has nothing to do with a player. Make no mistake, the hiring of Nolan Teasley could change the entire direction of this franchise. Now, we're talking about a guy who climbed the ladder from intern all the way to assistant general manager in Seattle. And now he's walking into Minnesota with the opportunity to reshape the power structure, influence the quarterback position, and put his fingerprints all over the organization. But here's the question nobody seems to be asking. Did the Vikings bring in Teasley to continue their current vision, or did they bring him in to actually change it? And if he's truly getting the authority that many people believe he's getting, then every coach, every scout, every executive, and every player on this roster could be under evaluation starting today. Now, so we're going to break it down on what this means for the Minnesota Vikings and what Vikings fans should be watching for in the next coming weeks. So let's get into it. Now, here's my initial thoughts on the hiring of Nolan Teasley. If you've been following me on this channel, I had two guys at the top of my list. It was Teasley and it was Gray. Gray was the assistant general manager from Buffalo. I kind of felt those two guys kind of stuck out to me, with the general manager situation. I mean, I kind of felt they both had similar backgrounds with the scouting, ability, and they basically worked their way up in different organizations. But the difference between Gray and Teasley is that, Gray actually started with the Minnesota Vikings for 11 years, and then he went on to Buffalo. But Teasley started straight out with the Seahawks, and he worked his way up to assistant general manager. And you guys already know how I felt about the other candidates. I wasn't really too big on Rob because I wanted the Vikings to kind of hire somebody outside the box and basically somebody that was with a different organization so they can bring some new ideas to the situation. But if they did end up hiring Rob Brzezinski as the general manager going forward, I would have been okay with it. I just really wanted, a structural change going forward because I just kind of feel like the Minnesota Vikings were kind of on the treadmill going through the same situation all over again. So with the hire with Teasley, I actually like it because on paper, the things that's happening in Seattle, are what we want the Minnesota Vikings to actually do. And it's crazy that the Vikings seem to always hire, candidates from other teams that basically just got through winning the Super Bowl. We did the same thing with Kevin O'Connell right after they won a Super Bowl with the Los Angeles Rams. But this is the reason why I think they chose Teasley. It's because, one, he worked his way up from an intern all the way to assistant general manager. And two, he's basically been with the Seattle Seahawks so long that he's seen the Russell Wilson, situation, play itself out, Geno Smith, and then Sam Darnold. So I feel like the Vikings picked Teasley because he was able, well, not just him, but the Seattle Seahawks were able to make a transition and pivot and still be competitive at the same time. And that's something that the Minnesota Vikings always believe in, is actually staying competitive. They don't like to basically be in tank mode and, restructuring and shit like that and rebuilding year. So I think that holds a lot of weight with the Minnesota Vikings organization. And I just feel like Teasley can teach, some things that the Minnesota Vikings front office hasn't dealt with in a long time. And if you go back to the Russell Wilson situation, a lot of people kind of clowned that. It was like, oh my God, they're giving up on Russell Wilson. He's a franchise quarterback at that moment, in Russell Wilson's career. People were looking at him as a potential Hall of Famer, but they moved away from Russell Wilson right before he hit the cliff. And look at Russell Wilson right now. I mean, he's been to Denver, went to Pittsburgh, and then, he went to New York. And now he's basically, I would say he's retired right now. So that was actually the right move. And that's how organizations in front offices have to move, in the NFL. They have to do things the right way, and they have to have a vision that's long term. And even though they went and signed Geno Smith and people thought Geno Smith was not going to, be a a capable quarterback for for them going forward. He did have one good year basically to restart his career, but if you look at it, it was more about the structure of that organization. They were able to run the ball. They had skill players in position to help Geno on his way. And then next thing you know, they trade Geno to the Raiders after 2 seasons, and then boom, they get to the Super Bowl. So that's something that I feel like the Vikings are interested in with Teasley, going forward. And I just got to give my hands off to ownership, because by going out and bringing in Teasley, it shows me that the Vikings are serious about moving this organization into a different direction going forward. Because we can sit here and talk about Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, and his struggle for so long, but if you look at what the front office and the GM and assistant GM and everybody included in this in the Seahawks, they actually knew how to draft. And then one of the main reasons why their team looks the way it is because they kind of knocked out a couple of draft picks, year after year after year. So I'm excited about the hire. I don't know, how everything's going to pan out, but going forward, hey, I like it. So let's talk about how this actually changes the power structure going forward. Now, will Teasley be the final decision on all football, related topics? Now, there's a lot of things going on right now, with people talking about, with they retain Rob Brzezinski, Kevin O'Connell, and the coaches have a lot of input on what's going on, and then they bring in a new general manager. Some people actually thought that the Vikings would actually, promote Rob Brzezinski to some kind of presidential role where he, reports directly to the Wilfs and everybody else is under him. And, we have to bring up the triangle of authority that was in place, about 20 years ago. So we're not sure how this is going to work out. We did have reports come out actually say that Teasley will be reporting directly to the Wilfs. So let's see if Kevin O'Connell and the coaches will be reporting directly under Teasley. I would hope so, because I think that if you go outside of your organization and you hire, someone to come in and to be a general manager, you will want to give him full control going forward. And that's just some things that us as Viking fans, kind of have a gripe with, because we had Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah in here and we kind of figured out, on the back end and, through certain situations that Kwesi was just a guy that was basically too collaborative going forward. And one thing that you got to understand is this though, right? When you hire a general manager, the general manager is going to be the one to make the decisions. And since he's the one that's going to make the decisions, he's going to be the one that's going to be the fall guy if those decisions, are not good. And just like we saw with Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, if we have, bad draft picks, whatsoever, he's going to be the guy to blame. So hold on real quick. Let me get to this. Sorry about that. So let's get back into it. So it's like I said, like, when you hire a GM, the GM is going to be the one that's going to be blamed for everything that goes wrong. So if that's the case, and we already saw that go down with Kwesi, I hope that they give, Teasley the full control of the 53-man roster, making decisions and stuff like that. I'm not saying that they can't be collaborative and work together, because every organization has their trust that they work together to make decisions going forward. I just don't want to get to the point to where we get to a lot of bickering and have the same scenario what we saw with Kwesi, to where he's just a guy here. But what I read from multiple reports that basically explain what's going on with Teasley, he's a no nonsense guy. He's a straight up football guy. So he might be the one that can come in here and basically put his stamp down and say, look, this is what we're going to do going forward. If it works out, boom. If it doesn't, we can pivot and do something else. So that's just something I'm interested in and seeing how that plays out. But here's an interesting topic that we need to get into, because we got to talk about this quarterback discussion, right? So this is how I see it. And I thought about this last night. I had to put this in my notes before I did this video. Nolan Teasley comes from the Seattle Seahawks, which play in the NFC West. And within their division, they play against the Los Angeles Rams, the Arizona Cardinals, and the San Francisco 49ers. And we have a quarterback competition on our hands. We got Kyler Murray coming from the Arizona Cardinals, right? So Teasley has been with the team, with the Seattle Seahawks for multiple years, right? Way back since 2013, right? He knows what Kyler Murray is firsthand because you prepare for your quarterbacks in your division. Now, I'm not saying Teasley's going to immediately come in here and say, hey, Kyler Murray's ass, and we need to trade him right now. Or he's going to go in here and say, like, oh, Kyler Murray's actually good. He just didn't have a lot of weapons, around him in Arizona. And basically the fact that, the way their organization, does things, it was basically the Cardinals that didn't put Murray in a situation to succeed. But why I'm bringing this up is this, though, right? He has first knowledge of what Murray is. He could come in here and say, look, we need to see what McCarthy is going to do going forward, because down the road, we are going to have to pick up his fifth-year option, and see, if he can be the quarterback of the future. And I'm not saying, he's going to basically shake these things up right now. Now that bye week at week 6 is looking a lot interesting, because if Kyler Murray wins this quarterback competition and he struggles within the first 5 weeks, I can say that we can actually see some kind of change. And even with Kevin O'Connell with his play calling, if the plays, don't look too good for the first couple of weeks, starting the season out, I can see Teasley calling Kevin O'Connell in his office and saying, like, look, moving forward, you may have to give up, your play calling to somebody else to kind of see some things, paying it, work yourself out. So I'm just saying, man, it's interesting to see like what's going to happen, with this scenario, because bringing in somebody like Teasley from the outside, he has no relationships with Murray, no relationships with McCarthy, no relationships with Kevin O'Connell, no relationship with, Brian Flores. So this, like I said earlier, in the intro of this video, everybody is on notice right now. Everybody is. So I'm really excited to see how this thing is going to play out. And, one thing about it too is like we have already, heard, last week, the assistant general manager from the Los Angeles Chargers, he took his name out the hat, and it was word on the streets that he did that because he felt that there were way too many cooks in the kitchen. So it's a lot. It's a lot. But we're gonna keep going forward in this video, and I got something that nobody is talking about right now, and this is it. What if the Minnesota Vikings decide to move on from Kyler Murray and JJ McCarthy after this offseason? What if Teasley actually says, you know what? I scouted a guy. We set him, made him second string. He's in development right now. He sat under Geno for a whole year. Then he sat again, under Sam Darnold. What's to say if Teasley says, you know what? I don't believe in none of these quarterbacks on this roster going forward, but a guy that I scouted and a guy that I helped draft in Jalen Milroe, what if the Vikings make a trade for him within this offseason? It's a big possibility because the Seahawks are coming off of a Super Bowl winning season, right? They're already paying Sam Darnold. I'm not saying Sam Darnold's going to ask for more money, whatever, but they're already paying Sam Darnold. Milroe is basically sitting there. And just like I said before, Teasley was the assistant general manager during the time. So that means he scouted him, and that also means that he helped draft him. I'm not saying how big his say was, within that decision, but he was there when they made that decision. And I don't know what the compensation could be. It could be a third-round pick. It could be a player swap. It could be a second-round pick because it's a quarterback. Quarterbacks in this league are actually at a premium. But that's something that we could talk about also too. And I'm gonna bring this on when I get on with, by the time you see in this video, me and Rap would already did our live stream, so I'm gonna bring it to his attention also too. But I'm just saying it's a possibility because if the Minnesota Vikings, let's just say they finish with a 500, subpar record, 98, whatever, and they're going to the offseason and basically saying like they have to get another quarterback, right? They don't believe in these quarterbacks on the roster. Kyler Murray wants to sign somewhere else. McCarthy is either injured or still playing bad, and he hasn't actually make that step in the right direction when he's actually playing. Jalen Milroe could be a possibility. And I'm not saying he's going to come in here and hit the ground running. All I'm saying is Teasley scouted him and he helped draft him. So it could be an immediate impact. But here's another thing I want to talk about too, though, right? Within this video. It's like this though, right? So we got to get to the point where we're able to have the conversation about analytics and traditional scouting going forward. And I was just listening to to one of my favorite guys that I listen to, which is Tyler Fornes and Luke Braun, two different times, and they basically talk about the situation too. And even Matthew Collar, I actually got his book and kind of read his book, and it helped me understand a lot with Pro Football Focus that sometimes when people get out there and they talk about the Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and the way he operated and he was an analytics guy. Analytics has been going on, for years. I just feel like people be so tied up on buzzwords. Like you have to have some kind of analytics if you're, running a successful franchise. That's within basketball, football, hockey, baseball, whatsoever. But for me, it's the actual pairing with the analytics and traditional scouting. Basically, what I'm saying is that, the analytics can tell you one story, but the eye test can tell you another, and you have to pair those two, when you actually have to make your decisions. And this kind of goes with the situation when I'm always talking about how, the term football guy, is such a big buzzword, especially in the Vikings community, because Kwesi wasn't a quote unquote football guy. And I just think like one of the things with Teasley that is intriguing is I feel that, he may be able to pair those two going forward. And that's something that the Vikings haven't had, in a long time. I go back to Rick Spielman. Rick Spielman, with him having a scouting background, he had some draft that was piss poor, and he had other drafts where basically he hit it out the park. And at the end of the day, I just feel like this team, for them to actually be successful, they have to consistently draft better. And with this last draft, we don't know, how these players are going to pan out, but we just gotta wait and see. So that's pretty much all I got, for this video right now. I mean, my final thoughts, man, it's just basically like this. It's like I'm I'm happy with with the Vikings hiring Teasley as the new general manager going forward. I like it. I'm intrigued. I like his background. I'm happy that they didn't hire anybody that was extremely close to Kevin O'Connell, because you guys already know how I feel about that, with Kevin O'Connell basically picking his boss. I hope that going forward that Teasley has the command of this organization, that he's able to make the decisions that he wants to make. I don't want to get into a situation, with Kwesi Adofo-Mensah all over again, where he's just basically the fall guy and he's a guy that basically just bouncing ideas off of everybody else. I mean, y'all know how I feel about my Vikings. I want them to win. I want them to be competitive. I want them to be competitive every year. I believe that we have a lot of talent on this roster, and it's just disappointing that the Vikings are not in contention. But I do understand the fact that the quarterback position is the most important position, of all of football. If you get that right, everything else kind of like falls in place. So at the end of the day, Viking fans, we are not going to know whether this is the right or wrong move, with Nolan Teasley overnight. We are just going to have to wait and see. So y'all let me know what y'all think about the video. Y'all let me know, what y'all think about Teasley in the comments. Let's just keep having this conversation. I'm not sure, when the press conference is actually going to, be held, but I will be, going live directly after that, or bringing in the video. So that's all I got for y'all, man. I just wanted to kind of do a little deep dive on the whole situation going forward. So let's end it like this, and Skol.